The city never sleeps, and neither did the questions. In a world full of shadows, every story has two sides. One they want you to believe, and the one we dig up. Welcome to Gumshoe Case Files, where we follow the clues, connect the dots, and expose narcissism, one case at a time. The sun was relentless that day, bearing down like a mean narcissist looking for a fight. Typical, because that is what I do. I look for the mean narcissist looking for a fight, or a quick getaway. They call me Madame Gumshoe, and I'm a private eye specializing in affairs of the heart, the kind that break or tear at its strings. He had a look of a man being on the bad side of a deal when he walked into my office that day. I was just about to dunk my head under the cold tap water. The air was sweltering, and I couldn't tell if I was sweating or melting. I could tell he looked worse than me. I poured the two of us a cold, stiff glass of ice water, melted, and handed a glass to him. His eyes were heavy and distant. His suit was crisp, but it didn't sit right. It looked like it belonged to a man with fewer worries. His kind were usually steady. Solid. The one-woman man type. So why was he in my office? He grabbed the glass with shaking hands, downing the water like it was the last drop of ancient whiskey. His nerves were shot, but he had a mission. He set the glass on the counter with a soft clink, straightened his suit, and looked at me, collecting his thoughts. I let the silence stretch. Men like him come in when they've got something to lose. His future? His wife? Maybe both. I waited. People talk when they can't stand the quiet. He was no exception. "It's my wife," he finally said, voice trailing off into the thick summer heat pressing through the open window. She's different." "How so?" I motioned for him to sit. He hesitated, chewing his bottom lip, eyes fixated on the floor, like the words might crawl up from the cracks. "She used to be so sweet, so caring." He shook his head. "But it doesn't feel real. It's like I'm living with a stranger, like I'm a guest in my own life, familiar but foreign. I don't know which way is up. She's got me twisted." I took a slow sip, watching him over the rim of my glass. I'd seen this before. Love turned sour. Affection gone stale. Sometimes it was boredom. Narcissists bore easily. Other times, betrayal. Narcissists thrive on the chase. This one? Too soon to tell, but something was off. A gumshoe always trusts her gut. "What changed?" He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. I don't know. That's why I'm here. All I know is my marriage is crumbling. I try to communicate, and I'm the crazy one for caring. I get frustrated, but I'm the bad guy for showing emotion. I'm fighting for us, and she couldn't care less. I feel like I'm trying to win a losing battle. I let out a slow breath, setting my glass down. "All right, Mr. Abernathy," he said. "All right, Mr. Abernathy. You sure I'm the right person for this? Sounds like a job for a therapist. He leaned forward. I need to know if I married someone who fell out of love, or if she was never in love at all. I know when I'm being played, and something about this, well, this whole thing is just off. He started pacing. See, 6 months ago, she began pulling away, staying out late. Said she was with friends, and that was the end of our date nights. She was too tired, had a headache. Then she moved into the guest room. Now we barely talk, and when we do, it's just her picking me apart. But she'll spend my money. Oh, that's no problem. I raised a hand. Okay, slow down. I need facts, not emotions. He exhaled sharply, nodding. All right, Mr. Abernathy, I'll take the case, but I need you to know, truth ain't always pretty. His expression hardened. If she wants a divorce, fine, but I need to know. Was she ever in this for love? His voice cracked. I love her, even if... I stopped him. I'd seen it before. A man led blindly by love, ready to fall on the sword of his own empathy. Mr. Abernathy, I'm not here to tell you how you feel, but you do realize what you're asking me to find out, right? He nodded. Yeah, I want to know if I married a narcissist. All right, then here's what I need from you. Stay factual. Don't let your feelings cloud your judgment. This could be a misunderstanding, or it could be worse. Either way, we deal with the facts. I'll find out. His voice was tight. Do you think she is one? It was the same plea I heard 100 times. A man standing on the edge of truth, too scared to jump. They hedge between reality and the dream they're still clinging to. Evidence rips off that blindfold. That's my job. It's too soon to say, I told him. But it won't take me long to find out, and when I do, you'll have your answer. I jotted notes on my pad. Tell me about your wife. Vivian was her name? Vivian Abernathy, sharp as a razor, beautiful, and the thorn wedged deep in her husband's side. Late nights, private phone calls, classic red flags. She wasn't cruel, not outright. When she wasn't gaslighting or manipulating, she was polite, tolerant even, but she was absent. Even when she wasn't in the room, she was a ghost. Communication? A dead end. I asked her where she's been or how her day was, Mr. Abernathy said, running a hand through thick jet black hair. Simple questions always seem to turn into arguments. Maybe he was too demanding. Maybe he wasn't. Either way, I'd find out. I tapped my pen against the desk. Point blank, do you think she's got another man? His jaw tightened. I don't know. I held his gaze. Well, let's find out. He blinked. Now? I pushed my chair back and stood up. You came to me, Mr. Abernathy. That means you want the truth, and the truth doesn't wait. I showed him to the door. I had work to do. I waited for Abernathy to drive away, watching his taillights vanish into the thick city night before I grabbed my coat and locked up. No tag-alongs and no distractions. If I was going to get to the bottom of this, I needed a clear head and a sharper eye. The first step, the Blue Orchid. That was a swanky joint with a shady clientele. The Blue Orchid was where secrets marinated in top-shelf liquor and cheap perfume. It was the kind of place where men in tailored suits whispered deals over whiskey, where women with painted lips played their own games, and where truth had a price, if you knew how to pay. I'd been there before. The music was always just a little too smooth, the lights dim enough to keep sins hidden, and the air thick with cigarette smoke and bad intentions. It was a place where people went to forget who they were, or to become someone else entirely. Vivian Abernathy fit the type, high class, beautiful, and if Abernathy's gut was right, dangerous. If she had secrets, this is where they'd spill. I stepped out into the warm night, pulling my collar up against the breeze. It was going to be a long one. The blue orchid had an elegance that masked its true nature. Secrets lingered in the air like the cigarette smoke curling towards the chandelier. A jazz band played soft and slow as I leaned against the bar, letting the atmosphere settle around me. I signaled the bartender. "Vivian Abernathy." He didn't answer, didn't even blink. Instead, his gaze flicked towards the corner booth. That's where I found him. He sat with an easy confidence, a black fedora tilted just above his eyes to cast a shadow over his face. Tattoos marked his knuckles and crept up his neck, but it was those ice blue eyes that held my attention. The kind of stare that told you he wasn't just a man, you were looking at a warning. I grabbed my drink and slid into the seat across from him. He didn't move, just exhaled a slow breath, amused. "Well now," he said, voice as smooth as the whiskey in my glass. "That's a name I haven't heard in a while." I wasn't buying it. "I think you know her better than you're letting on." His smirk deepened, but he said nothing, and that told me everything. I wasn't going to get more out of him, not just yet. But that was fine. The night was young, and so was this case. I finished my drink, stood, and tossed a few bills on the table. "I'll be seeing you." He just chuckled. I left the blue orchid with more questions than answers, but one thing was certain. Vivian Abernathy wasn't just stepping out on her husband. This was bigger, and I intended to find out just how deep it went. Vivian Abernathy was the kind of woman who knew how to make an entrance, the kind who could turn heads with a glance and break hearts with a whisper. She walked into my office like she owned the place, wearing a red dress that clung just enough to be dangerous. Her perfume was expensive, her nails perfect, not a single detail out of place, except for the look in her eyes, cold, calculated. She sat without being invited, crossing her legs like she had all the time in the world. "You've been asking about me," she said smoothly. I leaned back in my chair. "Your husband hired me." Her smile didn't waver. Of course he did." She pulled a cigarette from his silver case and lit it, taking her time. "And what's dear Oliver so worried about?" I watched her, taking note. No surprise, no concern, just mild amusement. Classic narcissism. No empathy, no remorse. The kind of woman who saw people as stepping stones or obstacles. "He thinks you've changed," I said, "that you're pulling away, maybe stepping out." She exhaled a slow stream of smoke and tilted her head. "And what do you think?" I tapped my pen against my notepad. "I think you don't care whether he knows or not. That tells me you've already gone. Just waiting for the right moment." She let out a soft laugh. "Sharp. But you're wrong about one thing." She leaned in slightly, voice like silk over a blade. "I've never been in." There it was, the truth in 4 words. She had never loved Oliver Abernathy. "So what's the plan?" I asked. "Divorce or something messier?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Why would I leave empty-handed?" I studied her. The expensive clothes, the diamonds, the easy way she spoke about a man who thought he still had a chance. She'd been siphoning money. Had to be. "You've been moving funds," I said, watching her reaction. Just the slightest shift, a flicker in her expression before the mask slid back into place. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. Sure she didn't. "And the guy at the Blue Orchid?" I pressed. "Tattooed knuckles, blue eyes, black fedora." She didn't blink. "No idea." Liar. I set my notepad down and leaned forward. "You can play coy all you want, Mrs. Abernathy, but I see it clear as day. You married Oliver for his money. You strung him along just enough to drain him dry, and now you're done. But you don't just want out. You want gone." Her smile sharpened. "If that were true, you've got no proof." "Not yet, but I would." I watched her finish her cigarette, exhale one last curl of smoke, and rise gracefully to her feet. "I do hope Oliver gets the help he needs," she said sweetly. "Do tell him I'll see him at dinner." She walked out like she hadn't just confessed to a crime without saying a single incriminating word. I picked up my pen and started making a list. Vivian was running a con, and I was going to find out just how deep it went. Vivian Abernathy didn't exist. Well, not really. The name, the charm, the carefully curated life, it was all an illusion. A high-stakes con played out in designer dresses and whispered promises. And Oliver Abernathy? He was just her latest mark. The kind of man who believed in love, who thought he'd found something real. But the money trail told a different story. She'd done this before. Different cities, different names, different men. She moved like a ghost, slipping into their lives just long enough to drain them dry. And when the well ran dry, or when she got bored, she disappeared, leaving behind nothing but heartbreak and empty bank accounts. But Oliver was different. He wasn't just rich, he was powerful, connected. If she wanted out, she couldn't just vanish. She had to make sure he'd never come looking. That's where the tattooed man came in. A fixer, a confidant, the one who handled the details so Vivian could keep her hands clean. He'd help her set up offshore accounts, move the money bit by bit. And when the time was right, he'd help her to do the unthinkable, fake her own death and pin the blame on Oliver. It was a long game, but Vivian was patient. She didn't need to kill Oliver outright. No, she was smarter than that. She was killing him slowly with doubt, with manipulation, and with the kind of psychological warfare only a true narcissist could wield. By the time she was gone, he'd be too heartbroken to fight back, and if the plan went smoothly, he'd be sitting in a prison cell, convicted of a crime he never committed. Vivian would be free, untouchable, and very, very rich. But there was one thing she hadn't counted on: me. I wasn't just following the money, I was following her. And I wasn't about to let her disappear. Vivian thought she had it all figured out. She played the game like a pro, calculated, precise, and heartless. But the thing about con artists, they always think that they're the smartest person in the room. That was her fatal flaw. I had something she didn't. Experience. I've seen narcissists like her before, weave in their tangled webs of deception, believing they were untouchable, but they always left a trail. And in Vivian's case, it was her offshore accounts. She'd moved the money in increments, just small enough to avoid detection, but I followed the transactions, traced them to a single point, a private island where her so-called new life was waiting. That was her endgame. That was where she planned to disappear. But I needed a way to make her slip up. A narcissist's greatest weakness? That's their ego. They can't stand being outplayed, and Vivian was no exception. I set the trap. Using my connections, I arranged for a tip to be leaked to the press. An anonymous source claiming Vivian was already dead. If she was planning to fake her death, I'd beat her to the punch. I even had a falsified police report confirming her demise. The story spread fast, and Vivian, she panicked. She needed to prove she was alive before she was ready to disappear for good. And that's when she made her first mistake. She reached out to her fixer. The tattooed man was loyal, but only to a point. He was in it for the payday, not the sentiment. When Vivian called him in a frenzy demanding that he fix this mess, I was already listening in. I had tapped his phone. It was a risk, but it paid off. The call revealed her entire plan, how she had drained Oliver's accounts, how she planned to frame him, and most importantly, where she was hiding. And that was all I needed. I tipped off Abernathy first. He had the money, the means, and now the truth. It broke him, but it also set him free. With my evidence, the authorities caught up with Vivian before she could vanish. She was arrested on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. As for the tattooed man, well, he cut a deal, spilling everything in exchange for a lighter sentence. Oliver Abernathy walked away, battered but wiser. Vivian was brought to justice. And me? I walked into the night, stuffing my hands into my pockets as I watched them take her away. Another case closed. Another narcissist who thought she could play the game, only to find out that she was the one being played. They say a narcissist never plays to lose because they never suspect they ever will. That's their weakness and my advantage. I'm Madame Gumshoe. I deal in high crimes of the heart, exposing the immoral and often criminal activities of those who take love for a game and people for fools. This case, another con artist unmasked, another victim freed, another lesson learned. Justice may not always be clean, but when the truth comes out, it's always sharp. And that's what lets me sleep easy at night.